What's going on, guys? Another episode of Off the Schneid here. With the NFL draft over, we're going to transition the episodes to a little more fantasy football related as well as sports betting stuff. So if you're into that, hit that like and subscribe button. Today's show, we're going to have a 3-round mock draft, 12 teams, rookies only. Now that we know where guys have gone and what the depth charts are going to kind of look like, I'm going to make some projections as well. Super excited for this show. I put a ton of work into it for you guys. So let's get right into it. Let's start out with round 3. All right. So I figured we'd start at the end of the draft and work our way towards the first overall selection. There'd be no fun to just release my first overall pick right off the hop. So we're going to work up, third round, second round, third, obviously. So with the final selection in my rookie draft, we're going to have Eno Benjamin going. In redraft leagues, it's not likely that he gets drafted at all. He's going to be third on the depth chart. I don't see him unseating Chase Edmonds there. So I don't see there being a ton left over for him, but he did contribute 77 catches in his last 2 seasons at Arizona State. So if he is going to contribute, I do see it being on passing down. So we'll see, but I mean, he's worth a flyer in maybe a dynasty league, but in redrafts, it's not likely that he gets drafted. Same thing with Joshua Kelly. He's third on the depth chart, and I think Justin Jackson takes a big jump forward this season and finally gets a chance at some more touches. He was extremely productive in college at Northwestern. He had 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons and was a very good pass catcher out of the backfield as well. So with Eckler and Jackson, I don't see there being a ton left over for Kelly. So redraft leagues, he's probably not getting drafted. Dynasty leagues, maybe worth a late round flyer. If you can stomach having either of these guys on your bench for 3 to 6 weeks, something like that, to see if an injury occurs or they just dominate the touches that they do get, something like that, then good on you. But it's not likely they're on too many rosters in 2020. Same thing with Devin Duvernay. He's 3rd or 4th on the depth chart. He's going to have a shot to win the return job, kick returns, punt returns, but he's definitely going to have some competition there. If your league does reward return yards, then you might be able to move him up a little bit. But other than that, he's not likely to be drafted. Anthony McFarland is a bit of a wild card. I thought about moving him up, but there's quite a bit of competition there. It's not a very clear path to touches. That could change drastically by the time training camp rolls around, but he doesn't offer a ton in the passing game. And there's like I said, a lot of competition. I think Benny Snell might be the guy there. We'll see. Or if they just give James Conner another shot in his contract year to see if he can stay healthy. But I highly doubt that happens. Injury could propel him up. We'll see what happens. But I don't personally target Anthony McFarland too high. Keyshawn Vaughn in Tampa Bay. This is another guy who's not quite buried, and there's some carries and some touches that opened up from Peyton Barber leaving. But again, I see a guy like Dare Ogunbowale and Rojo Ronald Jones kind of cleaning those up. I think they're going to be more of a pass first type of a team, even with Tom Brady. So we'll see what happens. But I mean, maybe he turns into a goal line type of a back and kind of picks up some scraps. But I think Dare Ogunbowale definitely is a guy to target, especially in PPR leagues next year. Brian Edwards in Oakland, in Las Vegas. He's a guy that I would absolutely target if I'm in a dynasty league. If it's a late round or if you're an auction draft and it's a dollar kind of a guy at the end of the draft, it's more than worth your buck or a late round pick. There's a very good possibility, in my opinion, that they potentially cut Tyrell Williams after this season. They'll have 0 dead money if they do cut him after 2020. And I see that as being a pretty good possibility, especially with what they've drafted this year, including Brian Edwards. So I think it's a very decent possibility that they cut ties with Tyrell Williams after the season. And then Brian Edwards is one of those guys that definitely benefits from that. So, and with an injury, these numbers could definitely go up. So he's definitely, in my opinion, worth a late round flyer in redrafts, and most certainly worth a shot in dynasty leagues. Jalen Hurts is going to be pretty interesting. We'll see how they use him. I definitely see him being used by Doug Peterson. I think they're going to use him in the red zone quite a bit. As you can see, I have him contributing on as a passer, rusher, and catching a couple passes. So we all saw Philly. We know Doug Peterson's very has a very imaginative style. So he's gonna, I think he's gonna find ways to get him the ball. You're not drafting a guy like Jalen Hurts in the second round without some kind of a plan. People are thinking Taysom Hill, but Taysom Hill didn't throw the ball at all in his first year, and he has only thrown it, I think, 6 times a season since then, something like that. So I definitely see him contributing, but without injury, this is kind of where he's going to sit, and he's not going to get drafted in any redraft leagues. Again, Dynasty, you might propel him up a little bit. Next, we got KJ Hamler in Denver. With what they did in the draft with Judy and Albert O, and then Deshaun Hamilton already there with Cortland Sutton and Noah Fant as well, there's quite a bit of competition for what I see as being fairly limited targets in Denver. I think they're going to be a more run-first team. They got a defensive head coach in Vic Fangio. They just signed Melvin Gordon. They have Philip Lindsay there already, 1,000-yard rusher back-to-back seasons. So I see them being more of a run-first and play action, kind of similar to the 49ers and how they run their offense. But he's going to probably be the guy in three wide receiver sets. So he's worth a late-round flyer, again, a cheap dynasty pick, that kind of thing. I don't see a huge potential for the stats to go up from here, but I could be wrong, but I don't see a huge potential even with injury, because an injury to either Judy or Cortland Sutton, Deshaun Hamilton is going to be the guy that probably benefits from that. So, and KJ Hamler is going to be competing with Noah Fant and Albert O in the short yardage possession type of route. So, again, worth a late round flyer, but not super duper valuable next year. Next, we've got Devin Asiasi from New England. They drafted him pretty high, so I think they're definitely going to give him a shot. He was the 91st overall player, and I don't particularly think that he's a top 100 player in this draft, but his measurables are good. I do like his stats, everything like that. I expect him to be the number 1 receiving tight end on the Patriots roster this year. We all know that Josh McDaniels like to get the tight ends involved. And with these stats, you might think, oh, these are a bit conservative, they're going to blow these out of the water type of thing. But it's pretty rare that a rookie tight end surpasses 500 yards. It doesn't happen a ton. The rookie record is 894, I think, Jeremy Shockey a couple years ago. So I just don't see that happening for either Asiasi or Cole Kmet, who we'll talk about next. But I definitely see him as being the best tight end option for the Patriots, and definitely worth a late round flyer if you're going to pair him with another tight end, especially in Dynasty. Same thing with Cole Kmet. He might have a more value than Asiasi, obviously, but worth a late round selection, and definitely worth it is as a dynasty keeper. He's gonna have Cole Kmet's gonna have to be he's gonna be in competition with a couple guys for targets, including Jimmy Graham at tight end, Anthony Miller, guys like that, the short routes, and as well, I see them being more of a run first type of a team. Matt Nagy's he definitely likes his tight ends. Obviously, he's got double-digit tight ends right now. That's not going to happen by the start of the season. They're going to have a normal, 4, maybe 5 tight ends on the roster because they do use them so much. But I mean, they're not going to keep double-digit tight ends, and Cole Kmet's going to be the number 1 guy there. So again, if you're going to pair him with another guy in a redraft league, absolutely makes sense. And in Dynasty, you can bump him up a little bit. Lynn Bowden, I really, really like. I really like Lynn Bowden and what he can do. I think a lot of people are saying he's going to be more of a slot receiver. I see him picking up some targets and some touches from Jalen Richard as a pass catcher. I think he will work a little bit out of the slot, but I think he's going to catch more passes out of the backfield and run the ball a decent amount. He's kind of a gadget guy, so he's got similar traits to Jalen Hurts, maybe not quite as skilled, obviously, but he's got similar traits. And he can do a lot of things with DeAndre Washington leaving. That frees up 108 rushing attempts and 41 targets in the passing game. I think he's likely to be the team's kick and punt returner if Hunter Renfro's not that guy. But I like a lot of things that Lynn Bowden can do, and he might be a guy that you can slot into your lineup once or twice during the fantasy season. Definitely worth a pick in Dynasty. Again, redrafts and draft accordingly. LaMichael Pirine for the Jets. I'd really like as a solid handcuff for any Le'Veon Bell owners. I definitely think that he's the guy to own. He caught 40 passes last year for Florida. And then we're freeing up 91 rushing attempts and 19 targets from Bilal Powell and Ty Montgomery leaving. I expect him to gobble up a few of those for sure. The offensive line is definitely improved after last year. They signed George Fant, Connor McGovern, and Greg Van Ruten, and then they went out and drafted Mekhi Becton. So the offensive line is definitely going to be improved from last year, and I see him contributing as a rusher as well as a receiver, and again, a solid handcuff. I think he gets drafted in most leagues as long as it's relatively deep, 12-team or more type of thing. All right, here we got the second round, so a little bit more to sink your teeth into, definitely a little more value. All these guys will likely be drafted somewhere as either handcuffs or just flex starters on their own. So I got Laviska Shenault last in the second round, last pick of the second round. I think there's going to be some people that think that's a little too low, but like it or not, the depth chart in Jacksonville is relatively tough to crack. 1,000-yard receiver DJ Chark, who I think is going to be the best wide receiver on that team again. And like it or not, Chris Conley had a career season in his first season with the Jags, so it's pretty easy to pencil in those stats, or at least close to it for him. And then Dede Westbrook in the slot, and they still have a guy like Keelan Cole there. They drafted 3 wide receivers, and then I think added another one in as a undrafted free agent. So there's a lot of competition for targets. They signed Tyler Eifert as well, and then they still have Josh Oliver there. So I think there's not a ton of targets to go around. I do see the Jags throwing the ball a little bit more with Jay Gruden calling the plays there, but I just don't see there being enough unless there's an injury that could propel Shenault up a little bit, but I don't see there being a ton of room to grow from here without injury. So again, Dynasty definitely worth a flyer though. Durrington Evans I really like, especially as a handcuff. He could potentially turn into a flex starter just on his own. And he's definitely 100% the handcuff for Derrick Henry. I don't think there's anyone else on that team that can kind of dispute that. So he offers a little more in the passing game, and there's definitely some targets and some rushes that have opened up from Dion Lewis leaving town. So he didn't have a ton of work last year, Dion Lewis, but in 2018 there were 67 targets there for him. So I think that I think there's going to be some opportunity for Evans to potentially be a flex starter on his own. And if there is an injury to Derrick Henry, he's going to be the beneficiary of it for sure. So he's 100% handcuff and will be drafted in most leagues. Same thing with A.J. Dillon. I think he's going to be the goal line back there. So I don't think there's pretty much anything that can change that. He's huge. He's 6 foot 250 and ran a 4.5. So I really, really, really like those measurables, and I think he definitely takes over as the goal line back, hence why I have a decent amount of touchdowns for him. He doesn't offer a ton in the passing game, especially with the 2 pass catchers they already have. Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones caught 39 and 49 balls last year. I don't see him and unseating them as kind of a passing down back, but I like him as a goal line back, and if there is an injury to Aaron Jones, I think A.J. Dillon is going to be the guy. I think he's definitely worth a late round pick and a couple bucks in a dynasty draft, because there's a very decent potential with his measurables. You gotta give him a shot, I think, at some point. I do like Aaron Jones a lot. I think he's a solid quality running back, but with A.J. Dillon's measurables and the way he can run the ball, it's going to be, especially in that cold weather, it's just he's going to get a shot, I believe. Next, we got Tyler Johnson in Tampa Bay. Again, there's a decent amount of competition here for targets. But with Brashad Perriman leaving, 70 targets gone, and I think that Tyler Johnson can catch better than 50%, and that's basically what Brashad Perriman did last year. So if we can pencil in those stats, then great. But if I do see him a little more likely eating into Chris Godwin's stats more than he would eat into Mike Evans' stats, but we'll see. And then adding Gronk, and then still having Brait and OJ Howard, there's a lot of targets there. So there's a lot of competition there, and I don't really see him moving up from these stats too much, even if there is one injury on the roster, unless there's a couple and he gets kind of thrusted in there. Other than that, I don't see him moving too far up this list. A guy that I do quite like, and he's a little bit of a wild card as well, is Chase Claypool. Gotta love him, Canadian kid out of Abbey. A lot of people are trying to say he's going to become a tight end, or they want to, push him to be a tight end, that kind of a thing. But the dude's 6'4", 240, and he ran a 4.42. That's not wide. That's not tight end. Like he can play wide receiver in the league with that sort of speed and with that size. So there's a lot to like with Chase Claypool. The only wild card is Ben Roethlisberger and where his shoulder's going to be. So we'll see, but he has a good shot at moving quite a bit up this list and potentially being one of the better wide receivers in this class, stats-wise and fantasy-wise. Van Jefferson with the Rams. I like this pick. He's pretty quick. I think he got clocked at the Senior Bowl faster than Devin Duvernay, and that's in practice. And Devin Duvernay ran a 4.39. So you gotta like his speed. I'm gonna expect a little bit closer stats to Brandon Cooks than I would to Josh Reynolds. I think they play very different. Josh Reynolds ran a 4.52, and Brandon Cooks ran a 4.33 in their combine. So I think he's a little bit closer to Brandon Cooks than he would be to Josh Reynolds, and I think he slides more into that role. So. And I think he's going to run the ball a little bit with that speed. You're going to find ways to get him the ball. So I definitely like his potential. And with the Rams, Jared Goff threw the most passes in the NFL last year. And I think that's going to be pretty close to the same thing again next season. So I think there's going to be some decent opportunity for Van Jefferson to move up this list. And next we got our first quarterback. I think people are probably going to definitely give me some heat for this one, but it's just a fact that quarterbacks are not as coveted as running backs for sure, and even top tier, middle tier wide receivers. So you might be surprised with where I got my quarterbacks here, but it's just the fact. In a dynasty, you can move both Tua and Herbert and Joe Burrow later. You can move them up your list in a dynasty, but in a redraft league, they're not going very high. They're just not. You're going to pair them as maybe a 1A, 1B with a quarterback. You can kind of play the matchups week to week type of thing. But no, if your team is going into the fantasy season with Tua or Herbert as your number one quarterback, you're going to be in a tough position, in my opinion. So he's not, I mean, it's going to be a bit of a tough route for him to start week one, considering what's going on in the world right now. If it was a normal season, a normal year, I could see him having a much better shot at being the guy in the first game, week one. But the way I projected it, I kind of have him starting about 12 games, four to Ryan Fitzpatrick to start the season, and then unless he's won all four, they're probably going to turn to Tua and give him a shot. Again, similar with Justin Herbert, I've got him starting, I projected him starting 14 games. I don't have him starting week one either. I do give him a slightly better shot at starting before Tua, just because of the health and what's going on. They can't get in front of their teammates, that kind of thing. And Herbert's got, in my opinion, much better weapons in LA than Miami has. So they still got Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Hunter Henry, even Austin Eckler. So I think they have better weapons for him to work with. And I think he has a better chance to start from week one. But 14 games projected for Herbert and 12 games projected for Tua. Now we've got the first pick in the second round, T. Higgins. I do like the pick. There is a lot of competition for targets, but there is also a lot of potential for injury in in Cincinnati. And if either AJ Green or John Ross, any of those guys, Boyd, Auden Tate, if any of these guys get hurt, T. Higgins is going to be the guy that benefits. So, and again, it's a very reasonable possibility that could happen. So the only issue that the reason why I have him kind of last in this kind of tier 2 of wide receivers is he is playing with a rookie quarterback. Cut it how you want it. Joe Burrow is still a rookie quarterback, and unless he has a record rookie season, I don't see T. Higgins moving up from here too much unless there's a big injury. But either way, I don't see him cracking the 1,000-yard mark. But we'll see what happens. Then we got Jalen Reagor. People might think this is low as well, but they do still have Alshon Jeffrey and Deshaun Jackson. Those guys are still there. They were hurt last year, but they will be back. They added John Hightower and Quez Watkins, and then traded for Goodwin. There's a ton of targets there that are going to get gobbled up, and Reagor will get his targets. He's a first-round draft pick, so he'll get his opportunities. But there's a lot of mouths to feed there. So if there is more injuries to Jeffrey and Jackson again, that kind of a thing, then you can definitely slide him up, and he's worth a little bit more in dynasty leagues for those similar reasons. But in redraft leagues, I don't see him moving up too much unless there is a big injury again, which is very possible. So we'll see. Jerry Jeudy, I don't particularly love the fit in Denver. I've said it before, and I just don't love it. So that's kind of why I have him where he is. If Jeudy went to Oakland, I'd have him a bunch higher. If he went to the Jets, I'd have him higher, that kind of a thing. But for where he landed, and I see them being, again, a run-first team, I don't see Drew Lock slinging the ball a ton. So I think it's going to be relatively limited. He will get his targets, unless there's an injury to Courtland Sutton. I think this is pretty much where you can pencil in his stats, and in my opinion. But I do definitely like him long term in dynasty leagues. Brandon Ayuk to the 49ers. He's going to take over in the slot. He could jump up from these numbers, but again, I see the Broncos and the Niners running a fairly similar offense, run first, play action, that kind of a thing. Brandon Ayuk could definitely benefit from in the play action game, but and again, he could surpass 800 yards, maybe 4 touchdowns, but I don't see it being a crazy jump from here. Even with an injury to Deebo Samuel, I don't see any additional targets coming his way. Maybe a couple more, but nothing crazy. So, and then they've got a couple guys in competition for targets. They got Jalen Hurd coming back from injury, who's out all last season. They still have Dante Pettis there, and they really seem to like Kendrick Bourne. So there's competition, and they're a bit of a run first, play action team. So I do like this projection. I don't think there's a huge amount of wiggle room, but we'll see what happens. All right, first round, this is what we all came for. These are the guys that you're going to covet. These are the guys that you're going to put on your list to draft absolutely in dynasty leagues. These guys are going to be very high on your list to grab. There's definitely some start every week type of guys. So let's jump into the last pick again. The last pick in the first round, J.K. Dobbins. If there's an injury to either Mark Ingram or Gus Bus, then you can move him up here. But he's definitely one of the top handcuffs to have. And the Baltimore Ravens have one of the best backfields in all of football. I think the Ravens and the 49ers have the two depth-wise the best backfields in all of football. So he's definitely got some competition, but he could be a flex starter on his own, even with those guys in the lineup. I think he moves ahead of Gus in terms of touches, but again, Mark Ingram there as well. So it's going to be tough to grind out kind of like a 1,000-yard season or anything crazy like that. I just don't see that happening. But if there is an injury or if anything changes over the summer, you can slide him up this list. Next, we got Michael Pittman. He landed in a pretty good spot in Indy. I think that they're going to run the ball a little more with both Marlon Mack and then the drafting of Jonathan Taylor. Phillip Rivers is absolutely an upgrade over Jacoby Brissett, even at his age. T.Y. Hilton's still there. Paris Campbell missed most of last season with injury, so he was a second-round pick. I think he comes back. Hilton comes back. They still got Jack Doyle there. it's gonna be tough to like just take over and get all the targets and push 1,000 yards. It could happen. He could be the guy, but we'll see. I mean, it's not that it wouldn't be crazy to see him hit 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns this year, but with those other guys competing, especially Paris Campbell, I'm not sure. I'm just not sure if that happens. CeeDee Lamb, I really like. It's very easy if you just want to pencil in Randall Cobb stats. I think he's going to finish a little bit better than Randall Cobb did numbers wise. I think he's just a better wide receiver all around. He's a little bit more talented, a little bit more dangerous. If there is an injury to either Gallup or Cooper, I think he definitely skyrockets up this list, and he will finish with 1,000 yards. But without those injuries, Cooper played all 16 games last year. Gallup missed 2, I believe. But without an injury, I think this is pretty safe. They're still going to be definitely a top 3 offense with everything they have going on. Again, these stats are without injury. If there is an injury, he's going to skyrocket up this board for sure. Next, we've got Henry Ruggs. I originally had him a little bit higher, but I just couldn't find the stats. I just couldn't find the touches. The Raiders definitely spread the ball around a fair bit. They had 11 receivers hit triple digits in yardage last year. Not that that's a huge deal. Some guys were like 109 yards, but it still says a lot when your quarterback only threw for 4,000 yards. If Derek Carr can bump his number up to 4,500 this year, maybe we can see Ruggs top that 1,000 yards. But I just don't know. He should be more comfortable in Gruden's system, but it's going to be tough with everything that they added in the draft and the guys that they already have there. I just couldn't find the stats to kind of bump them up this list. They are going to get him the ball. They're gonna use him in the run game, I believe. Not as a running back, but they're definitely going to get him the ball and have him use that 4.2 speed. So he could bump up this list, especially with an injury to Tyrell Williams. If that injury does occur, then I think that Henry Ruggs moves up this board as well as Bryan Edwards. But without injury, I think this is a pretty solid stat line if you ask me. Again, we do not covet quarterbacks as highly as we do running backs. And that's just a fact. It's never going to change. So Joe Burrow, I do see as being the top quarterback. It's nothing. I'm not going on a limb here saying that, but I think he's going to be the number 1 rookie quarterback this year. And with the stat line that I can kind of see him having, he's a 1A, 1B type of a quarterback. He's kind of a matchup play. If you want to pair him up with someone like, I don't know, Matt Stafford or even Phillip Rivers, someone like that, if you're not drafting quarterbacks high, there's nothing wrong with grabbing 2 or 3 guys like that and just playing the matchups week to week. So he could be one of those guys, and this is a pretty solid stat line. It could push him towards a rookie record in either yards or touchdowns with all the weapons that they have. AJ Green's coming back, although he has definitely been injury prone the past 2 years. John Ross, if he can finally stay healthy, he's been working with TJ Houshmandzadeh in the offseason, so hopefully he can stay healthy. And then with T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Auden Tate, all these guys, I think that Joe Burrow's walking into a very good situation in Cincinnati. Denzel Mims. I think people are going to think this is too high for Denzel Mims, but I think he's going to be a very solid receiver. He's my first 1,000-yard rusher or receiver, so I think he's got a very good chance to break that 1,000-yard threshold. At 6'3", 210, 4.38 speed. Yes, sir. Yes, please. I mean, Sam Darnold is really, really going to have to turn a corner in this year. This is a very crucial year for Sam Darnold. It's his 3rd season. He's got to stay healthy, and he's got to turn the corner. Luckily for him, like I said earlier, they did beef up that O-line. So I think he's going to have his best opportunity that he's had in his career. So, and with a couple more weapons like Mims, I think he's going to have his best opportunity to turn that corner. But this is kind of a make or break year for Sam Darnold. So And to be honest, I see him taking that step. So I see Denzel Mims being the guy to benefit from that. So 1,000 yards, I mean, I might be a little lofty, but I like the situation he's in, and I like I think Sam Darnold's going to turn that corner this year finally. Jonathan Taylor next. The only reason I had him kind of so low, if you want to call this low, is Marlon Mack is still there, and he's surpassed 900 yards the past 2 years. So I would have him higher if Marlon Mack weren't there, but it was tough to kind of just pencil him in there, to be honest with you. I think he would be probably a top 3 if Marlon Mack weren't on the roster. The Colts have a very, very good O-line, so that'll definitely benefit Taylor as well as Mack as well as Rivers. I think he'll be the guy probably by about week 4. I think he's going to be the guy in Indy. So it might take it a couple weeks, but I think it's only a matter of time before he is the guy in Indianapolis. He was extremely productive in college. He ran for over 6,000 yards. He was only the 7th player to do it. Interesting little tidbit. He was still 1,000 yards short of the record, which was another Wisconsin Badger. If you can guess, go ahead. If not, it was Ron Dane. So very, very productive. What worries me is all the carries that he had in college. That's a little concerning long term. I'm not super concerned about it in his rookie year. So in redraft leagues, go ahead until he kind of, if he does fall off or falls apart or anything like that. But in dynasties as well, you might not want to put a ton of capital into him just because of that, all those carries. And it's historically, guys that have had a huge amount of carries in college haven't had the longest NFL career. It's just a fact. So I do definitely like Jonathan Taylor, definitely 1,000-yard candidate. And I think he'll be with those stats, he's pretty much a start every week, depending on your league structure. In my leagues, he's definitely a start every week guy. Next up, we got Justin Jefferson, who I think landed in the best possible spot for a wide receiver. And I think he's maybe the best wide receiver to go to that spot, if that makes sense. I think Minnesota's a great spot for him. No disrespect to Adam Thielen, but Jefferson is the most talented wide receiver in Minnesota right now. That's it. We got 94 targets, 1,100 yards from Stephon Diggs that need to be replaced. I think that he's the candidate to do it. He's the guy to do it. I think we might see him on the outside a little more. He's not. I don't think he'll be exclusively a slot receiver, but he'll definitely see a ton of targets out of the slot. The defense, I think, will be a fair bit worse than last year, which should force the Vikings to throw the ball a little bit more. So that should also benefit Justin Jefferson as well as maybe Adam Thielen. He had an excellent junior season at LSU. If it weren't for a guy named Jamar Chase, he probably would have been the Biletnikoff winner. So he can do it, and I think he will. I think he'll be a start every week guy and someone that you should absolutely have probably at the top of your list for wide receivers in dynasty leagues. Moving on to Detroit, we got DeAndre Swift, who a lot of people had as their number 1 running back coming into the draft. He landed in a decent spot. They do still have Kerryon Johnson, but I definitely think that Swift will be the guy to take over in the backfield. To me, it's only a matter of time. Kerryon Johnson just hasn't been able to stay healthy. He's missed 14 games in the past 2 seasons. Swift comes from a running back haven in Georgia. So he's definitely coveted. All those Georgia running backs are definitely coveted, and the only big problem I have is he could lose goal line carries to the gigantic Bo Scarborough. So he might not be the guy on the goal line, but he'll definitely be the most talented wide receiver on that roster, kind of all around. So I think we might be seeing with these last 4 picks, we might be seeing a little bit of a turn in of the guard going back to running back stats a little more heavy this season. Last year we had 15,000-yard rushers at running back, which was the most since 2012 when Ahmad Bradshaw was a 1,000-yard rusher. So I think we could see maybe three rookie running backs we could see getting breaking that 1,000-yard threshold. But I don't see it being much more than that. It's still a pretty tough number to hit as a rookie. But I see Swift being a start every week. We're not running back by the end of the season. Next up, Zach Moss in Buffalo. I would have had him higher if or another guy if Cam Akers or Swift had gone here, but I would have had Zach Moss higher if he ran a bit of a quicker 40. I wasn't super excited with his 40 time, to be honest with you. Not that that's a massive issue, but if he ran maybe a 4.55, something like that, I would have been a little more generous with the stats and his projection. But I definitely think he has a very good rookie season. I think he's the goal line back. He's quite a bit bigger than Devin Singletary. I definitely think Singletary still kind of carves out a role. But we got 166 carries and 2 touchdowns from Frank Gore. I don't think they're going to be re-signing Frank Gore, but I think pretty much all of those touches are going to go to Zach Moss, as well as some of the ones from Singletary. He probably will become the best pass catcher in that backfield. You can make a case for TJ Yeldon, but I don't see him seeing more touches than he had last season. So I see Moss ending up as being the guy, the goal line and passing yard guy, probably a 3-down back, to be honest with you, by the end of the year. Offensive coordinator Brian Daboll has been top 6 in rushing attempts in 5 of his 6 years as an offensive coordinator. And the only year that he wasn't a top 6 was in 2010, and he managed to get Peyton Hillis a Madden cover, 1,650 yards and 13 touchdowns. So if he can do stuff like that with Peyton Hillis, I like Zach Moss's chances quite a bit heading into this season. I had him originally as my number 1. I moved him down after giving it some thought and going through some stat projections and everything, but definitely a solid rookie season and a start every week, potentially 3-down running back. My number two pick, Cam Akers with the Rams. I really liked his 40 time. He broke the 4.5, so I really liked that. 223 totes and 857 yards, 12 touchdowns, plus 49 targets and 200 plus yards, another couple touchdowns in the passing game, gone with the departure of Todd Gurley. So there's definitely room for someone to eat in LA, and I think that's definitely going to be Cam Akers. He was their first pick, I believe, so it was a huge need, and I think they absolutely nailed it with him. He's a capable pass catcher, and he should, like I said, be that 3-down back for them. I don't see him having any issue whatsoever beating out Malcolm Brown and Darrell Henderson to be that number 1 guy and 3-down back. My big concern with Cam Akers indirectly is the Rams they're an Andrew Whitworth injury away from having a serious issue on that offensive line. So one injury to their O-line and they're going to be in a tough spot, which puts Cam Akers in a tough spot. But with these stats, you definitely can't go wrong. I think he's a guy that you should absolutely covet and have him at the very top of your list in dynasty leagues. My number one rookie is going to be Clyde Edwards-Helaire, running back from LSU. I would have liked to see him run a little quicker 40 time, but my eye test is just it's stronger than the 40 time. I'm not really concerned with what he ran there. I've seen him play, and that's enough for me. The O-line can use some help, but the Chiefs are up against the cap, and they didn't have a ton of draft capital, so they kind of did what they could. I think they got a good one in Yang, but and they'll probably move him inside the guard most likely. But I think that Edwards-Helaire is the most talented running back on that team immediately. He fits that offense perfectly with Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy. Everything that they like to do, he can do. So I don't see him running the ball for 1,200, 1,400 yards, anything crazy like that. But I definitely see him getting his touches and catching a ton of balls. 58 catches is what I got him projected for. He might run for a couple more yards, and might score some more touchdowns. We'll see. But I think this is I think this is a reasonable projection if you're looking at what rookies typically do. So again, if you're in PPRs, you might move him. You should have him here, and I think you should covet him very, very much in dynasty leagues. Any of the top kind of any of the first round guys you should have at the top of your list for dynasty leagues. So as always, thanks for watching, guys. I seriously appreciate it. If you're here for the first time, smash that like and subscribe button. Help me out, get this channel rolling. We'll usually have a little more sports than this. All that there is to talk about right now is football. So there'll be a UFC 249 show coming out shortly, definitely before the May 9 event. Fantasy football, sports betting type of stuff. So if you're into that, again, hit that subscribe button for me. If you agree or disagree with anything I had to say, leave a comment. We'll definitely have a conversation. I love interacting, so please do. And this is Cody saying, hey, if you're afraid to be wrong, you'll never be right.